Welcome to the program. I am your host, Andrew Wilkow. It is 8 p.m. here on the East Coast, and the media is just celebrating $335 million in a fraud trial where there was no victim of fraud, and $83 million for a victim of I don't know what in the case of Eugene Carroll. But we also have the case ongoing in Georgia, which has only become more interesting since we learned that DA Fani Willis hired her boyfriend to the tune of $654,000 of taxpayer money, to which he took her on lavish vacations, out to dinner, et cetera, et cetera. She says this has no bearing on the case. Oh, but it does. I think we should all be concerned with people who are running for elected office whose job it is to enforce and or uphold the law, when they tell their constituents or future constituents that if elected, they will target their political adversaries. Here's New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
And what would you say to people who say, oh, I'm not going to bother to register to vote because my voice doesn't make a difference, or I'm just one person?
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you. Get off your ass and vote.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass. He's going to know my name personally.
I love it.
From the Holloway Law Group, let me bring on a friend of my radio program. First time having him here on the Salem News Channel. Phil Holloway, thanks for joining us.
Always happy to be with you, Andrew.
All right, let's just start real quick and overarching here. Shouldn't we be concerned with people who are running for office to prosecute crimes against the people, where they say, vote for me and I will get that person?
Yeah, so listen, this is a big problem because a prosecutor, their job is to seek justice. They're supposed to be objective, they're supposed to be open-minded, and they're supposed to be fair. If they go into office, literally, having made a campaign promise to get any particular individual, in my view, Andrew, that's an abuse of discretion. It's an abuse of the awesome power that prosecutors bring with them, because they are literally the only people who can control a grand jury. They can convene a grand jury. They literally can weaponize the criminal justice system. And so any prosecutor who makes that type of claim, even before he or she takes office, ought to be disqualified, because what they're telling you is that they are putting their political self-interest before the interests of justice. It's a violation of the rules of ethics. It's wrong. And quite frankly, it's the kind of thing that all Americans should condemn and be very afraid of.
Yeah, it's one thing if a prosecutor says, I'm going to prosecute gang violence or gun violence or drunk driving or theft or whatever it is. That's a crime, not an individual. All right, let me move on to, I keep calling her Fani Willis. Give me the balls and strikes of what happens next. She took the stand. She was very belligerent. She didn't think she should be up there. But we know now that she took $654,000 of taxpayer money, hired a man she has a romantic relationship with, and they went on extravagant vacations. She said, well, I paid him back with cash that I had from my campaign. All right, the IRS might want to know about that. But what are the balls and strikes next? Does she get removed? Does the case get thrown out? Does it get reassigned? What happens next procedure-wise?
Well, we've got to wrap up the hearing that was televised last week, where she gave this disastrous testimony. We've got to finish that up. The judge has not actually concluded that. He took, if you remember, a lawyer named Terrence Bradley back into the jury room, and he was having what's called an in-camera discussion. That's basically a private discussion with the witness, where he's examining whether or not any of the material, specifically text messages between Attorney Bradley and the attorney for Michael Roman, Ashley Merchant, if those text messages are something that should be protected by attorney-client privilege with respect to Nathan Wade. So the judge still has to rule on whether that opens up the door to any additional testimony from Mr. Bradley. He's got to hear closing arguments, whether it be in person or perhaps he takes it by a brief. But here's the thing. The judge has to rule, and he's got something Andrew, that he can use to rule really either way. If he wants to rule in favor of Willis, he can simply say that all he has is the uncontradicted testimony, whether you believe it or not, that she reimbursed Nathan Wade, albeit with untraceable cash. On the other hand, he can simply say, I don't believe them. I don't believe them to be credible. Therefore, I think there's a conflict of interest. He could rule that way. But here's what you have to understand. There's an election for judges coming up in May here in the state of Georgia. Qualifying, this is a nonpartisan primary. Qualifying is in March, okay? The window right now, there's no declared opponent. And it's the kind of thing that if it were me, I might just say, I'm going to wait and make sure we get past the political season before we rock the boat either way in this, because no matter how he rules, somebody is going to be upset. So you never can take politics out of the court system.
All right, what would normally happen? I only got 2 minutes left in the segment. What would normally happen if the judge establishes that this relationship was illicit, it was corrupt? Do they say, well, that doesn't change the facts of the case, we're just going to reassign it to another public attorney? Or does the judge say, this is not fair to the defendants, I'm throwing it out?
Yeah, he could do that. And that's what Roman's attorney and Donald Trump and the others who've joined that motion, they've asked for that. They said, we want it thrown out. And if the judge decides, look, let's just say he does partially that. He removes Willis and her office and everybody under her from the case. Then the case is like an orphan indictment. And the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia has to decide whether to send it to another prosecutor. And if so, who would that be? That's a tough sell. No prosecutor wants to basically consume their office with this, except for Willis, who, like Letitia James, has been on a mission to get Trump from the minute she took office. So I think it would be a difficult thing for the state to replace her. On the other hand, if the judge tosses it out, the prosecutor can appeal that ruling, and vice versa. If the defense loses, the defense can appeal that ruling. So either way, this case is going to be tied up in the appellate courts of Georgia for quite some time. There's no way there's going to be a trial in this case before the election. And just one more point. Imagine if the indictment still stands and Donald Trump wins the election and you're the judge in this case. What are you going to do? Are you going to try to put a sitting president on trial? I think not. So this certainly is a game changer, regardless of how the judge rules. This is something that's a big problem for Fani Willis.
She had one job, right? I mean, the Democrats put so much in her basket. She had one job. Just don't hire your boyfriend with public funds. And I don't know if it was arrogance or ignorance. I got to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll get you back soon. Coming up next in my argument, did you see the Trump shoe? The media is very upset. Something to do with Navalny. That's next.